Hey everyone, this is Lance Schuttler, and I'm here with my good friend Terrina Picarello, and we're going to talk about some really amazing things as it relates to the brain, trauma, healing, recovery, and how to optimize the mind and one's life based around our brain and the miraculous, incredible organ and intelligence that it is. So, Terrina, thank you for being here. We're
Yeah,
making this happen. I'm really excited for this. How's it going today?
yeah. So good. You're one of my favorite people because you could geek out on brain stuff and all the little chemicals and all the little things that happen in the brain. And I don't have too many of those people that can, have as much fun with this nerdy stuff. And so I'm super happy to be talking to you today.
Yeah, thank you, Tarina. So, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your background and what you do?
So I'm a licensed therapist. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Arizona. And I specialize in treating people who have complex PTSD. I work with first responders, I work with veterans, and just anybody that has a complicated trauma case where it's not really resolving to the traditional trauma stuff. So, my business is mostly referrals from other physicians and from other therapists. So, I'm sort of the critical care when other things aren't working, then they'll come to me. And then the other thing I do is I work with people who have traumatic brain injury. Um, and so a lot of people that come to me have the trauma and a traumatic brain injury. And I'm an Amen certified brain health coach. So I got trained through the Amen method with Dr. Daniel Amen at the Amen clinics. And the overlap that I have with him was a natural fit, but also how I got to him is I would see people that, went round and round and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and really never got that much better. And then I just happened to collaborate on a couple of clients who had just been there, and I just witnessed them get better really quick. And then I was like, wait a minute, what was that thing you did? And then they were, I heard that come up a couple of times, and it stood out as the people that really got better pretty quickly and then never really came back and relapsed and all that stuff. So I was like, I need to learn more about that. So um, I do quite a bit of brain health, and I'm sort of known as the brain geek around here, and I love that. And for my own self, it was incredibly helpful because I grew up with six brothers playing tackle football on the street. So I have tons of concussions that at that point had never been resolved. And I always had these little glitches, in my function. And I just kind of like coped around it. But it was like an entire new world opened when I did the Amen method myself as a patient and had him, I had my brain scanned and then I did the treatment based on it. And it's mainly all nutrition. It's mainly all the treatments or supplements that you take, and you restructure the function of the brain through nutrition and mainly supplements. And so that's why I just went crazy over you when I first saw you, because it's what gets people better. It's what changed my life and got my brain working, which I didn't even know that some of those things could just be reversed. And so that's mainly what I do is I call it equipment issues. When you have a brain issue, it's like an equipment issue. So it's like an electrical short. So your brain's an electrical system like the heart. So when you have what you can't see your heart, I mean, you can't see your brain, and you can't feel it when it's kind of out of rhythm. Like your heart, you can feel it. If it's going too fast or too slow, you would see and feel something when your heart goes up and down. But when your brain waves go up and down, you don't necessarily get that sensation, but you're going to have behaviors. And so the behaviors tell us what the brain is doing. And based on that, we look for the nutritional deficiencies. So it's like exactly what your business model supports. So that's why I just really love your passion for what you do and the quality, because it's always a challenge to find really good quality nutritional supplements. But it's so important to create a treatment plan that actually causes that, neurogenesis that you always talk about. It's like really changes the equipment in the brain, and it changes the person's life. So so I'm just thankful for what you do, and you fit right into what I do.
Thank you, Terrina. And I echo all that same back to you as well, truly. And it's really exciting that, we've met and now been collaborating together for over a year. And, now we're going to really start to push a lot of new and cool things forward and
Yeah.
help a lot of people. And so, with that, why did you actually get into this? And why, I mean, it's sort of like a calling that calls a person, but was there something specific that happened, or like why specifically all of
It was
this focus?
completely crazy because I grew up in a family of all boys. And so it's just like tough it out. And there would never in a million years would I've ever gone to a therapist, or even really, we would break bones and have like gaping wounds and not even go to the doctor. It was just like, be tough, like don't be a baby and go get a cast for a broken arm. So it is just truly, I got in a very bad car accident in Dallas. I lived in Dallas, and people there drive like crazy. And so I had a really bad car accident where I got crushed between cars, and I had a head injury that I just couldn't recover from, and I just couldn't bounce. And I was only like 25, and it just I couldn't go to school. I couldn't function at work. I couldn't stay awake. I would just sleep every day. So it was pretty scary. And I went from doctor to doctor. They saw me in the emergency room and they made referrals, and nobody was helpful. And so it was like 6 months, a year, 18 months, and I was in terrible shape. So I kind of had to figure it out myself. And I just don't want anybody else to go through that. But this was like kind of right around the time that Prozac came out. So it's like late 80s, early 90s. And so the only thing they offered me was Prozac for concussion. They didn't even diagnose the concussion. And so, because that's like what I was saying, is you see these behavioral symptoms and it should inform what the brain function is, but none of the doctors that I saw had that education. And so I just started researching and figuring this stuff out myself. So a lot of what got me better was nutritional supplements. And I can't remember how I just accidentally ran across tryptophan and 5-HTP and B vitamins and zinc. And I just ran across, God put people in my path that just gave me little pieces. But it was pretty frustrating and kind of scary as a person that's not a medical doctor. I had to like heal myself. And I did it, but it was really stressful and took a really long time. And so I just wanted to figure out how to make sure that never happened to me again. And as I started to look into the information, I ran across information about trauma, and I never would have acknowledged that as a real thing because of how I grew up in a football culture in Dallas, Texas. Is like, don't tell me you got trauma, and it's just like, there's no such thing. Just don't think about it and toughen up. And, I was just blown away when I ran across actual functional imaging scans of concussions. So, and then also trauma. And it was still brand new way back then. And now we have tons of data about it. But trauma actually changes the physical functioning of the brain, just like a broken bone. You can see it in the brain and it leaves a mark. And then unless you reset it, just like you reset a broken bone, your brain won't recover and heal. And it isn't very hard to reset it at all, but you just have to do the right treatment plan. And it always includes, whether I'm working with somebody with PTSD or a brain injury or both, the main bulk of my treatment plan is always supplements.
Amazing, Terrina. Amazing. And you've got
It
something.
always works.
Absolutely. And you've got something that we're going to share here. a little presentation with some awesome images, and you can kind of explain things.
Yeah, just so people can see, because, you know, it was like, that was my big aha moment that changed my life and changed what I was studying in school, and why I got in this field is I couldn't contemplate that something that was traumatic, scared you, freaked you out, like an car accident, would leave a physical mark and change the function of your brain. And if it changes the function of your brain, it's going to change your behavior, and it looks like it changes your personality, right? Because you're a different person, because you have all these behaviors that we're supposed to know that the brain isn't working, but you just believe it's you, right? And
Right.
so I am living proof that it wasn't me, it was my brain. And if you do the right things, it just reverses pretty quickly. So just to try to help everybody truly appreciate this, and also, you know, spread awareness so we're all looking out for each other, I wanted to just show you these physical scans. Okay. And so on the left, what you see is this is a nuclear imaging scan, and this is called a SPECT scan. And what it does is it measures cerebral blood flow. And so we're going to look, and the colors don't necessarily mean anything, but what you want to see is overall fluffy marshmallow looking brain. And that means that what the SPECT scan is set to do is show color everywhere that the brain has adequate energy to function. So the one on the left that says healthy, since it's nice and fluffy and filled out, and it's you know, all the areas have color, it shows that they have adequate energy to function. So there's enough electrical flow, there's enough blood flow, there's enough blood sugar to have it actually work as it was designed. So now we think about football. So I always just can't believe I'm saying this, because, you know, I'm from Dallas, and I babysat for a lot of the Dallas Cowboy players. And so it was hard for me to truly cross the line and accept that this was real, but it's totally real. So sometimes without the scan, people just really can't really integrate that this is, you know, really brain damage. But on the right is a real NFL player who participated in a big study that the Amen clinics did, and they had 167 players participate, and the players were across different spectrums of years play. There were some retired players, some current players. There were some players that just went up to college. There was a few college players, but it was mainly focused on people who had played in the NFL for more than 3 years. And so this is just an example. And so when you see the Swiss cheese looking brain on the right, and it looks like the person has holes in their brain, they don't really have holes in their brain, but where it looks like there's a hole, it means there's less than adequate energy for that part to function. So look how much of this person's brain basically has an electrical short. So their life is going to pretty much look just like that. They're going to have just as many holes in their function. They're going to have just as many holes in their relationships. They're going to lose about that much money because they're going to miss things. And so it's pretty devastating to not know that you can reverse this damage and just think that you just are doomed to live with that. That's why I do this. And it's also really important to target the treatment plan with really good quality nutritional supplements so that we get the result, because we're talking about somebody's life here, right? So it's pretty important to get it right.
Exactly.
You know, it's a person and it's a family, because if one person in the family's brain doesn't work, it pulls everybody down. And a lot of NFL players had very bad marital problems, which disrupts the whole system. It affects parenting, it affects all kinds of stuff, you know. And so a lot of that wasn't about the player himself, it was football brain.
Right.
So just to kind of show you a little bit, this is my brain right here, that Dr. Amen gave me for Christmas one year. I was so excited to get a brain. So when you see the image on the top left, it's looking at the brain like this from the bottom. And then the other image is looking at the side. And then on the bottom, it's looking at the other side. And then the other image is if you look at the brain this way, just so you can see what the 4 images are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
And so we just want to see all the views to see all the little areas. And so that's why there's usually 4 views on the scans. But I just wanted people kind of from here forward to know what the difference in the 4 things are. So if you go to the next one. So this is something I really want to spread a lot of awareness about is sleep apnea. So sleep apnea is something that is missed routinely everywhere in mental health circles. Someone comes in for severe depression. Somebody can't sleep and they can't think, and they appear to have all of the symptoms of depression. And if you don't do a full assessment on them and you don't know to look for sleep apnea, then we put these people on an antidepressant and it's not going to do anything at all to help them. And the treatment for sleep apnea is not antidepressants, but that's what the behaviors most match, and that's what most doctors are trained for. And so there's a lot of people that then they're not going to get better, and they just sort of feel like it's their, it's their defect, and they internalize like, I'm just, a slacker, and I took medicine and it's not helping, so it's just me, and that just hurts my heart so much. And so I catch this quite a bit just because I have the awareness and the education to, like, if somebody has gone to therapy and been on antidepressants and they're not any better, and they're starting to just lose everything that's important, I'm going to send them for a sleep study. And sometimes people will fight me and they don't want to do it, and sometimes it takes me a good amount of time to get them to just go get the stupid sleep study. And when I didn't have these images, it was even harder, but I whip these out of my little folder all the time and just say, look, this is what it really does. So the imaging is very helpful to help people just go, oh, it's not just snoring. And it isn't just that if I snore, I don't sleep great, because that they feel so bad that they go, it's not that. But when I show them the brain damage, then they go, oh. And so this is like worth its weight in gold to get a scan when somebody just can't kind of buy into even just sorting it out. But it's pretty devastating. Now, this is severe. So you can go and get a sleep study and they might say you have mild or moderate or severe, and that's what they're going to tell you. But so I don't want people to think if they get a diagnosis of mild sleep apnea that their brain looks like this. But if you go and get a sleep study and you actually get a diagnosis, you have to seek someone out that's going to give you a good comprehensive treatment plan and has a success in treating people and reversing this, and just stay with it until you find somebody that knows what they're doing, because the way you evaluate that is, do you get better?
Right.
So if you go to the next one. So when we talk about just right now, everybody is so overloaded with just stress. And so these scans, I think, are so helpful to help people truly appreciate that there's not one kind of anxiety. There's not one kind of depression, right? And so at some point in our life, we're going to have some anxiety and some depression, and hopefully it's transient. But if it isn't, then I want everyone listening to think about having an equipment issue, just like your car. If your car isn't running right, we can do a diagnostic and say, like, is your oil low? Is your transmission fluid low? Are your tires low? What's off? And then just correct it. And so with anxiety, I want people to know that this is part of what I do as a trauma therapist, is deal with where the brain gets stuck. So there is a situation that brought up anxiety because it was actually dangerous, and our fight, flight, fight, flight, freeze response is a little valve that's supposed to activate to help us survive that. And the brain has a shot of energy. And then what's supposed to happen is once we're safe and the situation is resolved, our brain is supposed to go back to its original factory setting. It's not supposed to get stuck in that fight, flight, freeze state, but it does. Lots of times it just gets stuck.
Yeah.
And so these scans are the two different kinds of anxiety that I'd love everybody to start just kind of like passing the word around and being aware of. Is on the left-hand side, we look at that body kind of anxiety, and that's going to be panic attacks where you have this sensation that comes up, and it could be caused by something that actually happened and scared you. Something actually happened and then you went into that. But what I find is people that have unresolved PTSD from years ago, or who have a brain injury, or who have sleep apnea, for sure. This is secondary to sleep apnea for sure, just so everybody knows, is because sleep apnea, you feel like you're suffocating in your sleep every single night. So you're going to go into that. I call it F3, is fight, flight, freeze. And it's a natural consequence of sleep apnea. And so this is the most common one that sleep apnea will cause. But also sometimes just having depleted nutrition. If you have certain basic building blocks of brain function and you're depleted in 2 or 3 things, what I call that is, I just call that like, that's a physical equipment issue caused by deficiencies. Sometimes you don't have PTSD and you don't have sleep apnea, but you're missing some basic nutritional elements from your diet, or you got depleted over time from a period of stress. And it can even be positive stress. Like I'll find that sometimes people that just either moved cross country, got a new job, or got married or had a baby, they just get depleted and they don't know what to look for and how to replenish. And they just kind of accidentally fall into this state, and it's hard to figure out because they're like, well, nothing traumatic happened. Why am I having panic attacks? But it's just the nutrition is missing. So the panic attack kind is caused in a part of the brain called the basal ganglia. And the basal ganglia, you kind of have a right and a left one. So on a functional imaging scan that I showed you before, where that image looks for low blood flow, and if there's not enough blood flow, you see looks like a hole. This is the image that shows us where there is too much activity. So there's too much energy. So a healthy functional brain is not supposed to have red and white anywhere near the top 2/3 of the brain. That little bottom part of the brain, if you look at this model, this part of the brain right here, and if you look at the image on the left, the bottom part that's got a lot of red and white, that's okay. You want this reflexive part of your brain to be nice and lively and have a lot of energy, and that's normal. But the rest of your brain should be real calm and chill. And that's what the color blue shows us. Anywhere that there's blue, you have nice, even, steady energy, and your brain's going to work. But if you look at the red and the white, that's not supposed to be there in that upper part. And so the red is the top 15% of energy that we can measure in the brain. And the white is the top 8% that we can measure in the brain. So it's like red hot and white hot. And so if I see that on a scan, I know that this person is suffering physically. And that kind of an overactivity in that specific little spot is going to make you feel like you can't breathe. It's the below your chin physiological anxiety where you physically feel it, and you can think that you're having a heart attack, and your stomach is usually involved. So you'll feel sick to your stomach. Sometimes people will have explosive diarrhea when this, overactivity in this part happens. And also you can have just a ton of physical body pain. Your joints hurt, your muscles hurt. And so it's a pretty big chemical storm that happens in the body, and it interferes with your daily function for sure. And it's terrifying because you feel like you are like, you have that physical response. So you really feel like something is really wrong. And so in general, a traditional medical approach to this would be to put someone on medication and just override the system. And so in an acute situation that helps, temporarily, but that's not a permanent fix. And I find, especially my athletes, there's a lot of athletes that had this get locked in there for any number of reasons. And their team doctor puts them on Xanax. So this is the, Xanax and Klonopin, the benzodiazepines is usually the prescription that you would get for this brain part being overactive. And those actually cause other problems in the brain, and they kind of can deteriorate the outer neocortex in the brain, and they kind of make your brain look like an alcoholic brain. And over time, they deteriorate the function, and if left unattended, you're going to end up with dementia. You're going to end up meeting the criteria for dementia, and that's just really not okay. And a lot of medical doctors don't have that information. And so Dr. Amen didn't know that until he had scanned, I think he said like he was 85,000 scans in when he started to see the correlation with the brain damage with people that had been on benzos. And so he doesn't prescribe them anymore. But there wasn't information he didn't know either. He used to prescribe them because we didn't know anything else. So part of what he found through his research is, what else could we do to slow this part of the brain down? This is actually one of the easier things to fix. I want everyone to know. This one is the GABA channel. And the GABA is an amino acid. It's one of the 20 amino acids. So I can give somebody some GABA. I can give them some L-theanine, which is also a very calming amino acid. I can put some glycine, in their diet. Sometimes there's a couple of the B vitamins that are deficient, and this just turns off. Like, this is so miserable to walk around with, but I pretty much resolve this like within a week. Not to oversell or sound, but it's true. So this is pretty easy to fix. So again, it's the nutritional deficiencies, and you have to have the good quality and the right dosage and the right, nutraceuticals to fix it. But nutraceuticals actually resolve the issue. They don't just cover it up.
Right.
Like benzos. And then the other scan over on the right is a different part of the PTSD response. But you see how there's a whole different part of the brain that's overactive? It's right in the top, right behind your forehead. That's called the anterior cingulate. And the anterior cingulate is a very important part of your brain. And it is, Dr. Amen calls it the gear shifter. So it's right between the two hemispheres. It's a pretty big part, and it runs all along the whole brain. And that part is the serotonin channel. So if you have inefficient production of serotonin, if you don't have the nutrition to build a serotonin molecule, then this is what your brain is going to look like. And if your brain is overactive in this part, it's pretty miserable. It's a very different kind of anxiety because it's a different part of the brain. So that's why these are so different, the types of anxiety, the parts of the brain. And the reason it's so important to tease that out is because the treatment would be different, right? One is the GABA channel, calm the brain. This one is the serotonin channel. So if you don't know that, you're not going to get somebody better. So this is sort of the constantly running over something over and over and over, and kind of being obsessed about it, and the brain just overworks and wears itself out. And so you're not going to be able to sleep if you lay down at night and your brain just goes around and around and around. And that's this part. And so if it's more in your head kind of anxiety, then it's this serotonin channel. So we've got to help you get your serotonin factory going. And serotonin is actually made in the gut. And you need some good quality tryptophan. And once this gets really out of balance, you're not going to be able to eat enough food with tryptophan to turn this around. You could then maybe once we get it balanced, you could be mindful. If you happen to like the foods that have a lot of tryptophan, you could try to maintain it that way. But to really reverse this kind of a overactivity, you have to do the nutritional supplements, but it's just amino acid therapy. It's good old fashioned amino acid therapy. And so really there's a new field that is mental health nutrition. So that's like, still, I find that no one's ever heard of that, mental health nutrition.
Yeah.
And so what that means specifically, if you could do good nutrition of any kind, you're going to feel better and your brain's going to work. But the reason it's mental health nutrition is because it's specifically targeted as a first treatment for a mental health diagnosis and the specific symptoms of anxiety, depression, that we kind of put under mental health. So I always start with the nutritional deficiencies and balancing, and also the correct assessment of which part is out of whack. And then it is not very complicated to create the right plan, and you get the result when you've identified the right deficiency and you intervene appropriately with the right channels and create more, neurotransmitter bioavailability. It's just resolved. And so it really changes your life. And so sometimes people have a hard time, especially sometimes physicians. I do get a lot of referrals from other doctors, but and they just have heard of me because I got someone better that they either know or it was their patient, and the doctor saw a big turnaround and said, "What did you do?" And they'll say, "Well, I went and saw this lady in Scottsdale," and then they'll refer people to me. And sometimes they don't really know what I do, but they know I just get people better. And then at some point, sometimes I will collaborate, because if somebody's on medication, I have to let the doctor know. I have to make sure that it's okay. And I would never start someone on amino acid therapy without consulting their prescriber if they're on medication. And I educate them, and they just are really like totally had no idea. What they'll say is that supplements, amino acids, could actually have such an impact on reversing a diagnosis of mental illness.
Right.
So mental illness really is not even a thing. It's a brain imbalance. It's either a brain injury or it's just an imbalance, which the imbalances are nutritional deficiencies. And, I know that you know this, but, I want people to realize that, especially with this one on the right, the overactive, overthinking, and it's always negative, which is just annoying. Because when you don't have any serotonin floating around, you have a negativity bias, and that is not very fun. It's not fun for you because all you do is notice everything that's wrong. But imagine what that's like for the people that live with you or work with you, because all you do is point out all the errors, and you just don't pay any attention to what's going well. And that's the most common diagnosis of depression is for this serotonin channel. And all of the antidepressants that everyone's on, if someone says they're on an antidepressant, they're most likely on an SSRI. Those are the most frequently prescribed antidepressants. And a lot of times it's the only ones that the primary care physicians are trained to prescribe. So I don't know if you were aware, but the latest kind of number says that 80% of people who are on a psychiatric med are not seeing a psychiatrist. They get it from their family doctor, their PCP, or somebody else that has a different specialty. And so a lot of times they just don't have the depth of experience and training to kind of get it right. And there's a one size fits all. So it's very common that I get people that are just all on the wrong things. And, it's easy to tell you don't get better, right? And
Right.
so this one is the SSRIs. And the difference between what pharmaceuticals do, which they can be helpful when you are absolutely miserable. Um, what they do is it's SSRI, which is selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So, what those class of medications do is they keep little serotonin molecules in the receptor site so that they're available for your brain to use. They just keep them, they keep it from getting absorbed so that it isn't available. And so they kind of keep the little bit that you have floating around so you can use it. But they don't help your brain make more serotonin molecules. You have a serotonin deficiency. So the amino acid therapy helps you make more serotonin molecules. It's a completely different intervention. They do two different things. And again, my most frequent thing that people say that come to me on SSRIs, they'll say, I feel a little better, and it's like about 20% better, which when you're miserable, that is, you want to feel 20% better versus nothing. So it's a little better, but it just doesn't really get them healthy and get their life back. And so they get kind of frustrated and they'll end up somehow in my office. And I kind of go over this with them. And not everybody that I see gets a scan. I would say most people don't, because the research is so strong of how to assess and how to look for behavioral symptoms. And I can pretty much figure it out without a scan because of the scans. And so I don't always need to, send somebody for a scan. But when we trial amino acid, nutritional therapy, it just resolves. So that's kind of our answer, right?
Right.
And so this is just a very different way to handle that type of, it's sort of anxiety and depression is why people are put on SSRIs. And
That's
so if
amazing.
you go to,
Huh? Yeah, that's amazing. So you do a lot of work with amino acids, and you've described a lot about that. What what's important about dietary fats and fats for the brain? Because the brain is so much fat. And I know that you've got information about EPA and DHA and omega-3s specifically for the brain. And how does that sort of tie
so
into what you're doing?
it's, they're called essential omega-3 fatty acids, because really without them, I'm not going to get you better and your brain's not going to really come back online and function. And so especially for the serotonin kind of depression and anxiety, so when that anterior cingulate is out of whack, usually the person is depleted in DHA. So specifically, there's the two omega-3s is the DHA and the EPA. So what we will have someone do with these symptoms is we'll have them on an omega-3 fatty acid that has a higher percentage of DHA to EPA. And that's what they need for this specific brain channel. And they respond wonderfully to that. And without that, I'm not going to completely resolve this issue with them. I'm not going to get their brain all the way back into balance without those essential fatty acids. And what they did with the NFL players is they took one group of NFL players, and all they did is, because this is how you do research and you find things out and you contribute to the field. So they had one group of football players that all they did was take omega-3 fatty acids, and they took 4,000 milligrams a day, and then we scanned them before and after, and we scanned them after in 3 months. Normally you would stay on this a little bit longer, and they did, but we just wanted to kind of like see what was happening 3 months later. And it was a huge difference in the physical scans, but because it was a research study, they had also had them do a lot of other diagnostic measures. So they measured their concentration, their short-term memory, their sleep, their mood. So with the football players that participated, they did a self-assessment of symptoms and behaviors, and then we had their spouses or someone that was really close to them or lived with them also fill out the same evaluations, because sometimes you don't see yourself, as you are. So we want to get the biggest picture. And the biggest I think surprise from what Dr. Amen said and the researchers was that just with the omega-3 fatty acids with the higher DHA, these players had on average 53% improvement in their short-term memory. That's just huge in 3 months. So it was almost like it was a little too good to be true. They're like, wow, like if that's true, that's great. But they redid it because it just seemed like, could that really be so simple that we put somebody on an omega-3 fatty acid that's, higher percentage of DHA? Would it really take care of short-term memory loss? Because do you know how helpful that is if you do that for somebody? If you give them one thing that's easy to take and they don't lock their keys in their car and forget their wallet and like have all these, drop balls all over their life, they are really, really happy. And it prevents accidents. It prevents all kinds of calamity in a person's life. This is one thing. And it also reversed their depression. So it's an antidepressant. So we found that this wonderful fatty acid in the brain is a very good, effective antidepressant.
Wow.
And when you go up against studies where they had one group that just did the oils with the higher DHA, and then another group that did antidepressants, and another group that just did exercise, and another group that did nothing, right? And it was such a difference that then you could say, okay, it was the DHA fatty acids that truly created that dynamic change. But it's now we've got so much study, that's been replicated so much that there's such a great body of tangible, grade A research on that difference in mental health and brain recovery, that I always use this in my treatment plan for depression, any kind of memory loss, doesn't matter what it was caused for, OCD, if people have OCD, and if they have insomnia because their brain won't shut down, I am going to go right to this. And 4,000 milligrams is the therapeutic dose for one of, for when you meet the criteria for this part of your brain not being functional, then 4,000 milligrams is the therapeutic dose. And then once we get the symptoms resolved, we'll take them to 2,000 milligrams for the rest of their life as a maintenance. And it usually stays in balance with that. But when I have someone that has a traumatic brain injury, any kind of post-concussive syndrome or any kind of other traumatic brain injury, I put them, and this is research-based, I didn't just think of it myself, but what they found is when you have somebody with a pretty severe traumatic brain injury from like being hit in the head, car accidents, football, that they need around 6,000 because their brain is just struggling so much. And when we gave them 6,000 a day for like 3 to 6 months, they just recovered so much better. Because if you don't sleep, you can't recover your brain injury. Your brain's never going to catch up if you don't get restorative sleep. And those omega-3 fatty acids are a wonderful sleep aid. They help your brain remember how to sleep. Yeah. So how many people that, just the average, person running around has a decent amount of insomnia, like, frequent, and doesn't really ever have great quality of sleep? Well, I would tell them the most obvious thing that I could do for you is do a trial of DHA and omega-3 fatty acids, but it has to be good quality for sure. The quality really matters. Where does it come from? What does it have in it? And also, you can get some blood work done, because sometimes people poo-poo this and they're coming in with big, serious physical issues. And I say, well, let's put you on some omega-3 fatty acids, and they sort of just feel like this lady doesn't get it, right? Like, you don't understand. This is like, I need something powerful. I need something big done. And I'm really got a physical problem. And I'm like, I do understand. And
Yeah.
that's why sometimes these scans are very helpful, because sometimes it's just hard for people to realize that a true deficiency in this area. And sometimes that's why I'll have the blood work, because they just kind of can't like get there, that how could it be that? And how could just something that simple fix it? But
Right.
it does. And it's just very real. And so it's not impossible to improve our mental health with these kind of interventions. But truly, the window I have from my seat as a therapist, it's really fun and rewarding for me, because I can offer something very simple, super easy to do, not very expensive, something you can do all by yourself. And once I teach somebody, they never not know it for the rest of their life. It's
Right.
a gift, and it always works. And then they can not only take care of their own health because they know what to look for and they know what to do if the symptoms come back, but they can do that for their children and their spouse and people. My kids just naturally, I didn't know this until maybe a year or so later. I sort of learned it after the fact, sitting at a game talking to the other parents. But my kids were just naturally seeing this in their friends, and just it cost me a little bit of money that I didn't notice, but they would just go into my kitchen cupboard where I have all my supplements and pass them out to their friends who couldn't sleep. And
Wow.
I didn't know they were doing that, but it was like, good job, because it worked. And so once I kind of learned, it's not that complicated. These are basic things, but they do have a profound effect on your life.
Definitely. Terrina, so one thing uh, that you said, like quality, and a question that I have is, okay, so DHA, where do people get it in the diet, and how do you differentiate the quality of, let's say, a supplement of DHA and EPA? Like how do you choose that? Because I think people will be wanting to know that, this is amazing information. So what do you do, like as a therapist? What are you looking at for quality, and also where do we get it in the food naturally?
Well, if you want to have the sufficient quality for your brain to function, you'd have to really eat a lot of fish. And so you'd have to eat like good quality salmon that doesn't also have a bunch of chemicals and pharmaceuticals in the salmon. It's very hard to find. So if you're going to eat farm raised salmon, I don't even know what you're getting exposed to. And I wouldn't eat that stuff. And so even if you get wild salmon, there's a lot of studies that show that it still has a bunch of crap in it, right? And so it's kind of, and also just in general, I live in Arizona. I'm not going to actually really have available, even if I wanted to eat a lot of salmon, as much as I would need to eat, and that I could find quality to get my levels up, especially if they are out of balance. It's just not going to happen. So, um, you know, I know that, like, with your new product, which you're correct, is the reason fish have it is because they eat algae. And so where would you get a good source of algae to like put in your food? Like, if you could, it would be very helpful. And if you could grow out the right kind of algae yourself and all that, but most people aren't going to have any way to do that. And so that's why if you just went to the mall and got 1,000 people to volunteer to take a blood test and check their levels, everyone's low. It's really terribly impactful on our mental and physical health. So look how many people would meet the criteria for having a mental health issue. What if they really just have an inefficient level of the essential oils in their system? And so, how many of us can eat fish as much as we would need to?
Right. And I know I've done some research on the numbers. As an example, to raise the omega-3 index percentage, kind of like what you're talking about, the percentage of the omega-3s in the red blood cell membranes, The average American is at about 4%, 3.5 to 4%. And we know that those levels need to be anywhere from 8 to 12% for
Yep.
us to be like
Yep.
truly, truly healthy. And even
Yep.
athletes, there was a big study done on college athletes, and their levels were only at about 4 to 4.5%. And so there's a big
Yep.
need for all of humanity, as you said, to increase the DHA and EPA because it's
Yep.
affecting so many different things, not just the brain, obviously.
But think about a college athlete who starts off just with 3%, and then they also have a lot of just they're overworked as people in college. They're like an athlete and they have to keep their grades up, so they never really rest, and there's lots of pressure. And then let's say they get a brain injury while they're playing their sport. Okay, so now they're tragically behind, and they're going to have a lot of mood disorder behaviors, and they're going to like be moody and grumpy, and for football players specifically, they're big people, and when they start having mood disorders from low fatty acids in their brain, they can't recover from a head injury because they don't have enough of the things that repair it. They get in trouble, they get in fights, they get arrested, they're suicidal. So it's a pretty big thing to miss.
Right, exactly. Um, Terrina, so are there other slides that you would like to talk about specifically? I know that we're kind of coming up on our time, but you've got a lot of amazing things here. So is there anything that you want to touch on as we get towards the end of this?
I think that this was the really important focus I wanted to talk about today, is for people to just have that awareness of the true impact of missing something simple and something essential. So there's some things that are simple but profound. I would say this kind of thing for me as a clinician to find this, it's a simple thing for me to find, but when I find it, it's a profound find. And the fix is simple, but the impact of the fix is profound in the person's life. It's the funnest thing for me to do because these things do work pretty quickly. And then, people are so happy with me, and it's kind of fun. And it's like, but it is the science behind the essential chemicals in our brain. Do we have enough? Are all the channels in good working order? And that's why I so appreciate your passion, and like how you just have that passion for this, and you also are just naturally gifted at understanding this stuff. It's like, seems like it's just fun for you and you couldn't not do it, right?
Exactly.
It's like, if you just like had time, you like to think about these things and study them. And so that's like the perfect kind of thing of you finding, your way of what you contribute in the world. And I truly appreciate it, because if I didn't have someone to collaborate with to supply the products for the treatment plans, then I can't do anything to make people better. And I can't tell you how hard it is to find products that are of quality to be truly a medical intervention. You've got to have, a nutraceutical is like kind of a pharmaceutical grade nutritional product that can change somebody's medical condition. And that's, I believe, what your business, when I look at, I've tried the products myself. So I always do that before I recommend them. But your quality is just really, really good. And I can just tell that you spend a lot of time making sure that it's good, because you understand that it is so important that, again, with something like omega-3 fatty acids, if it's not sourced properly, then you got some of that, but then you got some pesticides, and then you got some other things. And so sometimes people get annoyed that they have to spend money on supplements. I don't know if you run across that, and it's like, they're like, well, if I eat good food and I eat reasonably healthy food and I pay attention to the quality, I shouldn't need supplements. And what you and I know is that the food that we eat now, even if you go to great lengths to find as good a quality as you can find where you live, is not got the nutrition in it anymore.
Right.
So our beef doesn't have omega-3 fatty acids anymore because we don't let the cows eat grass. We feed them corn. So they don't have amino acids. So then when we eat beef and pay a lot of money for whatever we find, it doesn't have nutrition in it. So then we're not getting the omega-3 fatty acids. The same thing with the chicken breast. It doesn't have any amino acids like it did 50 years ago. And so, and just like this different fish that you could get the best quality possible, it might also have pharmaceuticals in it or something else. So it matters what you put in. It matters that you know what you're balancing. It matters that you have a proper assessment. But the availability of good quality supplements is so important for everything that I do. It's a foundation of how I help people. So that's why I love you. I love what you do. And then you just happen to be like a really nice, cool guy too. So it's like, I just think I just love having you in my orbit. And you're like a wonderful little treasure that, I'm glad that I ran across, because what would I do without people like you going to the trouble to create products that are accessible, we can find it, and we know that you go to great lengths to make sure it's good quality, and then you don't say, well, just trust me, like it's third party quality tested. You do all the right things, but because you do that, I'm going to get people better, and you're a part of my team as far as changing people's lives. So it's a pretty big deal. And, I'm really not overselling to say that. So I just was really looking forward to talking to you today. And, I'm always happy to do anything I can do on my end to help get the message out to people. And sometimes that's why I thought maybe the scans and showing people might help people to truly understand the impact of what you're trying to educate people on.
Absolutely, Terrina. Thank you so much for all of that. And I really appreciate it. I'm so happy to be collaborating with you and working with you, because that's the whole point, is to help people. Like, we make these amazing things, we do this work so that we can help people, and of course help ourselves. We need to take care of ourselves too, and we can just really make the world a better place. And the last thing that I wanted to say with that is, I learned so much from this presentation, and I know that those brain scans were very helpful for people listening and watching. So thank you for sharing those, and let's continue to do this. We will do more of these. Terrina has so much information to share. I mean, I've literally just had my mind blown right now, and on different shows that I've listened to that you've done, Terrina. So we'll definitely do more, and we'll talk about other topics as it relates to the brain and happiness, mood, and all of it.
I'm in because this is such a natural collaboration for me in what I do to in my practice. So I'm a yes. So whatever you need, you know where to find me.
Awesome. Thank you, Terrina. And thanks for everyone for listening. We'll have Terrina's links, her website, in the description. We'll put the algae oil DHA product that we were talking about in the description. And you can leave your comments below, and we'll take a look at those too. So thank you, Terrina. Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful, wonderful day.